For college basketball fans, why is the draft combine relevant? Well, it's relevant because this is the last temperature check, if you will, for players who are thinking about whether to go back to college or head to the NBA. Now, this is a decision that is always, or quite often, rooted in economics, meaning what is the earning potential in college and what is the earning potential in the NBA? For years, that has never been a close comparison. For kids who were in a situation that they or their families needed to make money right away, they had to go to the NBA. That is no longer the case anymore. In fact, I will tell you that the recent NIL news, specifically with Great Osborne and his reported $2 million deal at Washington, has been a frequent point of conversation here in Chicago, both among the NBA executives, the players as well, and specifically the players who are mulling the opportunity to go back to college. The two-way contract in the NBA is slightly over $500,000 a year. Now, obviously, that is huge money, but two-way contracts are not guaranteed, which means you could get cut at any point in the season. With more and more NIL deals now being papered, being contractually binding, there's an opportunity to not only make more money by going back to college, but to have it be guaranteed money on top of that. And that is changing the decision-making process for a lot of these kids. So let's talk about some of the more notable players that have big decisions to make. Number one, from the defending national champions, Alex Karaban. Now, Alex Karaban came into this event looking to play his way into the first round. He's reportedly already had some workouts and in consideration for teams at the end of the first round. He has been a monster of efficiency for UConn throughout the last 2 years. Came out, had a really good day to start, made 14 threes in a row in Monday's drill session. Tuesday, did not have the performance he was looking for, but he rebounded with a strong game here today in game 2 on Wednesday. Now, here's the decision-making process for Karaban. He measured in at 6'6.5". Obviously, another year is not going to do that, but I do think there's an opportunity to go back to UConn, become the focal point, and diversify his attack. I think NBA scouts really love his versatility. They love his processing ability. They love the passing and the floor spacing. The positional size is a little bit of a question mark. His decision is going to be a really interesting one. He has said that he is focused on the draft process, but he is, and I quote, in a win-win situation. At the end of the day, I think this is a player who has an opportunity to not only compete for a spot in the first round by going back to school, but let's think about this, has a chance to solidify maybe the best career in UConn history. He's 2 for 2 in terms of national championships years at UConn. Dan Hurley's talked about going for the three-peat. That's a lot harder than it sounds. But Alex Karaban, if he were to go back, he could really solidify himself as he already is one of the all-time greats, but really, would anyone have a better career in UConn history? So that is certainly a very tantalizing consideration for him. He is at the top of boards in terms of the most interesting stories because he is right on the brink, has a chance to go in that first round, but could slip to the second as well. Now let's talk about some of the other players who are contemplating going back to school, but who are also in the transfer portal. This is where it gets really interesting. The player who is in the news today, Ugonna Onyenso, who was at Kentucky last year, we've talked about him in the past. He's not in 5-on-5 action here at the Combine, but again, he was in the news because it was reported that he cut his list down to 3 or 5. Then he came out, or his coaches, representatives came out and said that is not true. Here's what we know for sure. The big fella declared for the draft in what most people thought might be a little premature. It does now seem that his earning potential is going to be much, much higher in college basketball. And given that the portal is closed, he has a wealth of options, no pun intended. North Carolina still needs a big. They are trying to replace Armando Bacot. They have not been able to do so yet. They are considered among his top options. Another program that is considered among his biggest options is Louisville. We've seen Pat Kelsey make some notable additions, 2 in fact today, including Connie Ruth, the former Michigan commit out of the high school ranks. He too needs a rim protector. Alabama was considered in the mix, given that they've already got Cliff Amore. I'm not sure that's an option anymore, but keep an eye on North Carolina and Louisville for Ugonna as time continues to go on here. And we'll be on the lookout there. You can follow 247sports.com for all that. A player who did really well here today, Coleman Hawkins. Now, this was one of those interesting cases where we knew he was declaring for the draft, 4th-year senior this year at Illinois, but he put his name in the portal on the last day allowed. That gives him the opportunity to play out this draft process, but then also cash in on the current NIL numbers if it turns out that the NBA doesn't give him the type of guarantee he's looking for. I'll tell you this much. He spoke to our Isaac Trotter this week. You can read about that at 247sports.com. He said he's 90% in the draft. His 17-point performance today had to have only further pushed that number. But I believe this is a player whose earning potential would be higher by going back to college. We've talked about the market drying up, lack of quality big men available. This is someone who is skilled. He can not only shoot the ball, he can pass the ball as he showed it today. He has terrific size to match. Going to be a very interesting case study because he too is back in the portal. And he said he's not playing in the Big Ten. So if he goes back to college basketball, presumably it will be at a new location. So he is someone that schools are here, I would say, even actively recruiting. They're here to see a lot of college coaches here to watch their own players. But with Coleman Hawkins, they are here to see if there's a possibility that they can lure him away from his 90% path towards the NBA, because he would be as good of a player as is left in the portal right now. Another player in that situation, Washington State's Jaylen Wells. This is what I will say about Jaylen Wells. I think Jaylen Wells is the best player in the portal that we are not talking enough about. We are talking about someone who started their career at the Division II level, went to Washington State last year, a little bit under the radar, and then exceeded all expectations, declared for the draft. And now, I'll tell you what, he's got a little bit of buzz with NBA executives. Went for 13 points today. People love his overlap of positional size and shooting. Interested to see if there's any playmaking that come for that. He's not expected to go back to Washington State because Kyle Smith took the job at Stanford. He's also not expected to follow Smith to Stanford because of the admission criteria there as a one-year senior. So this is someone else who, if he decides not to follow through on this NBA draft process, would go into the market as a wide open free agent, so to speak, and really not only command top dollar, but be, I think, one of the more valued players in the portal that we are not talking a lot about. I will tell you this, the perception of Jaylen Wells among NBA executives and college coaches is much higher than I think the general discourse among college basketball fans are. The NBA executives and college coaches have a very high opinion of this man and are very interested to see if he can make yet another step next year, given the progression that he's shown, not just last year at Washington State, not just in the 2 years prior to that at the Division II level, but you go back into his high school dates, and we've got a late bloomer who got notably better with each passing year and has continued to do so. So keep an eye on him as well.